All right, fast forward a few minutes here, and I want to mention a little bit about brake lines. These are the original H3 hard brake lines, and they come off with this little clip right here on the axle, and you can take it loose right here and take this whole thing off, and then you have to cut this bracket loose and take it off with the caliper, all as one assembly, and I think that works best, and do that on both sides. And then when you get ready to put it back on, I found that it's a lot easier to go ahead and rebend these, reshape them. They're pretty rugged brake lines from GM. They have like a rubber coating on them, chafe guard, and they're actually better than anything you can get at like Napa or AutoZone. So what I do is I re-contour them and rebend them, and I try to reuse as much as I can to put things back sort of stock. So I reuse the stock clips and everything. And a couple things you need to be aware of. I've bent this upwards a little bit, and then here's the new flexible lines. These things here, I don't use them, but you know, they're for another application, and you can either cut them off or, you know, I don't know, I just ignore them. They're not in the way, they don't seem to hurt anything. When you put all this back together, I found that these little brackets, if you cut them off right, what you can do is push it up against that axle tube, right like that, and then just weld it right there, weld it to the tube. And what you end up with is the factory bracket that holds the bulkhead connector between the rigid and the rubber hose, and that'll go just like that. And then you reshape this line, and the thing that you have to be careful for on both sides is you got U-bolts that are going to come up through here like this. Okay, so you have to leave room for that there and there. So those are going to be sitting like that. And then additionally, you're going to have the shock that comes down right through here. But if you, there's plenty of lengths, and you can rebend these and reshape them. When you're all done, it looks absolutely factory. And then here's a test fit of the shock on the other side. You want to make sure that, you know, your shock isn't hitting anything, and your sway bar isn't getting into anything. And then once again, this will get welded right there. And you have to maintain your clearance here and here for the U-bolts. And that's pretty much it for the brake lines. And I try to get all this ready to go before I slide it under the truck. It's always easier to do it up here. One more thing on the brake lines is, you know, I'm using brand new half-inch bolts, and these brackets come pre-drilled for a half-inch bolt, and then the Fox shocks like half-inch bolts. Now, if for some reason you're reusing Ranchos or you have some other brand of shock, you can use your factory 14mm bolts, but you're going to have to drill this bracket out. And then once you drill it out, of course, you're going to be stuck with that size hole and bolt. And any future shocks that you have, you know, you'll have to adjust the bore of the shock mount for that metric size. Since this truck's getting new shocks and new brackets and new bolts all at the same time, I just go with straight half-inch, and it makes it easy for any future stuff. These shocks, by the way, these are Fox 2.0 IFP shocks. These are not reservoirs. I think that's a waste. I have reservoirs on my truck, and I wheel it pretty extensively, and quite honestly, these ride better. They're much cheaper, and okay, so they don't have that SEMA show bling to them with the little, you know, reservoir hanging off of them, but I find these things perform great. And the part number for the rear, 952405. This is a 10.1 travel shock, and this works great with the spring over on the rear, and the valving is it's just a generic universal fit shock, but the valving works really good and gives the H3 a nice ride, and it's the correct length for what we're doing here. And I use a similar shock on the front that I believe is 98524-006, which is a 12-inch travel shock. So I run longer shocks on the front. All right, got the axle back on the floor. and ready for the first test fit. But what we got to do first is the leaf springs are held together with this pin on the top and then a bolt on the bottom, and that corresponds to the holes in the perches here. And what you have to do is you have to take and flip this bolt the other direction, so the pin is on the bottom, which will fit in here. So grab a couple C-clamps, clamp the pack together, and then you can just pull the pin out like this and then reinsert it in from the bottom like that, and just put the nut back on it just exactly the way it was, but upside down. Then you can tighten this up, release the clamp, and then at that point the pin will be facing downward and will fit into these 3 holes. Now if you don't want to do this, you're going to have to drill out these 3 holes, which quite honestly is quite a workout. When they cut these holes with a laser, okay, the edge of the hole gets hardened from the laser, and so to drill these out, yeah, it could be a real wrestling match. So it's a much easier to just flip the bolt, and then that way everything lines up properly, because that nut is too big to fit down in these holes. So you have to flip it upside down. Okay, so another thing that obviously has to happen for the spring over here is, you know, the H3 comes with these rather large spring hangers right here. And, you know, I typically start right here with the plasma torch and go all the way down. I follow the frame and I cut this entire bracket off, which goes all the way up to here, this whole area here. But on this particular truck, you know, he's got some sort of goofy step bars on here, and, you know, not knowing his intentions, I'm going to try and leave these as ghastly as they are. And, you know, the problem is they're bolted to this bracket right here. So normally I cut this entire bracket off, but on this truck, I think I'm going to come along here at the plasma torch, and then right here, I'm going to go straight down and cut them off, remove this back half, and that will leave enough meat here where this step is bolted to it. And I might actually even have to go in there and weld on a plate to reinforce what's left of that stock spring hanger so that it can support the weight of somebody stepping on here. I'd love to just get rid of them and take them off for good, but, you know, that's just one of the things you got to do when you're working on somebody else's rig. So here's, to give you an idea, here's the size difference between what I'm taking off and what's going back on. So this will sit up in here. You know, you can see it's quite a bit. So this bolt hole right here actually will be up here, and then this will get welded to the frame in place of it. Now, it's a little trickier on the other side because I do this with the fuel tank in place. And when it comes time to do that, I'll show you how I do it. I basically take a piece of 1/4" steel and I make a basically a torch flame guard, and I cram it up between the plastic tank and the frame rail, and then I just start cutting away at it with the torch. And so far I haven't blown anything up, so wish me luck. Okay, there are lots of ways to do this next task, but I've experimented many times, and this is the best method I have come up with for this. What you want to do is you need to locate the position of this bolt in relation to the shackles back there before you cut these brackets off. And, you know, originally when I was doing these years ago, I used to try and bring this up here and then mark the frame, because all this gets cut off, so there's no real good place to mark it. And if you get this wrong and you weld your new stuff back in the incorrect position, the leaf springs are either going to be not the same right and left, or they're going to be too far aft and the shackles will lay down flat, And if you don't do it right, they could be too far forward and then your shackles don't work properly. So the best way I've found to do that is using my absolute #1 go-to favorite tool in the world, the plumb bob. So I get right here on the center of this bolt, coming around the back side of the bolt, and then I let it hang, and I simply put an X on the floor. That way, when I put my new brackets back up here, I use the same method. I put the string on the bolt, I put the bracket. The new bracket's going to be way up here, quite a bit higher, and the only mark that I need is that one on the floor, which is great because I don't cut it off, I don't grind on it, I don't do anything. Technically, as long as the truck does not move, that mark should be in the correct place so that I can locate my new hangers exactly where they need to be. And you know, the Cheops built a pyramid in Egypt this way using plumb bobs, and time again I find it to be the most accurate, foolproof way to do it. I suppose if you're inventive, you can maybe find a way to mark the frame somehow, but you know, I end up grinding all that stuff away, and it just doesn't seem to work. So it's a little tip I use, and I try to share this with you to make sure you get this stuff back in the right spot. Also, you can see here we got some cracking in these bushings. I'm going to go ahead and reinstall these because it's not really in this guy's budget, but if you're gonna take the time to do this, check out Siberian for new bushings. It's a company out of Russia, and I've used their bushings before on other spring overs that I've done, and they actually work pretty good, and they're fairly affordable. You can get them off eBay or wherever, and they're a urethane version of this rotted out rubber stuff. Okay, when cutting the factory hanger off of the driver's side, this here is the plastic fuel tank, and a lot of guys take these out, and you got some hoses to take care of on the top, and then back here is the filler hose, and it's a lot of work, and I don't really think it's necessary. However, you are going to be cutting and grinding right here next to this, so you know, you're a split second away from, you know, basically leveling an entire city block if this thing goes up. But what I found is that you got this gap right in here, and that's perfect to take a blast shield like this piece of plate. I have a piece of 1/2-inch plate right here, and what I do is I take that and I jam it up in here, and then that sort of acts as a rash guard for the plastic fuel tank. And on this side, you can't really get to the inside of the bracket to cut it off the frame rail. So what I do on the driver's side is I'll take off the outer half here, and then once that's cut out of the way, I can cut the inner half of the bracket off actually from the outside. But to get to it, you have to kind of cut this piece off and get it out of the way, and then you can gain access to cut the inner piece off. And when I'm done with all this, I just pull my shield back out, and I sometimes do something similar when I'm welding the new bracket onto the frame rail, just so that I don't end up, you know, sparking or getting something up against the plastic tank. But the plastic, keep in mind, it is you know, non-conductive. So you don't have to worry about an arc or anything jumping to it. You just have to worry about slag or heat or the tip of a torch, you know, piercing it, which would be a huge problem. But so far, I've done this many times, and the plate trick is much easier than dropping the tank. Okay, so we're doing our initial test fit. We have the new hangers welded to the frame, and that's all been painted to prevent rust. And you want to leave these bolts loose until you get the truck completely back on the ground. In fact, I prefer to go drive it around a little bit and let this sleeve in here rotate and settle into its natural position.
and then come back and tighten this. And the same's true for these two bolts here on the shackle. Because if you tighten them when it's at full droop like this, and you put the truck on the ground, you're actually putting the spring in a bind. So the actual final position, the spring will be much flatter than where it's at now. And these sleeves in here have these little teeth that dig into the bracket. So you don't really want to tighten those when it's sitting at full droop like this. So I got my pins reversed and my perches are just tacked on. And you can see that's sort of the pinion angle we're looking at. That's 10 degrees right there. So the next step is we have to take these U-bolts, which are plenty long, and you're gonna sit them up in here like that. And you need to measure these compared to the height of this top plate and bump stop. And then you need to cut these with a cutoff wheel. The sweet spot's around 2 inches off of each one. So I've already measured that, and then you know, you have 8 of them that you have to cut. But it goes pretty quick if you just use a cutoff wheel and an angle grinder. And then I always dress the ends of them with a flapper wheel. And I also, you know, I take them and I thread on a nut first, so that as I remove the nut, it chases it and straightens out any burrs or funky stuff on the ends of these. But I'm gonna go do that and I'll be right back.